eBay Motors and Fox Racing welcome you to episode 74 of the Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. This week, Michael Uhlarik and I talk about the European motorcycle scene. And that's something we haven't talked about before. We've talked about emerging markets, India and so on. And we've talked about established markets, North America. But we've never touched on Europe. But as Michael points out, and this is an interesting interview, I think, because he talks about where the ADV style motorcycle was born, which is in Europe. He gives us that story. We talk about Roman roads and Roman chariots and all sorts of other things. And as he says, it is the birthplace. It is the home of the motorcycle. But before we get into our conversation, some words from those who make the Lowdown possible. It's the Lowdown. eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. With their new secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery, it's all built in. And eligible vehicle purchases are backed by up to $100,000 in protection. This is what modern car buying looks like. Get your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure purchases powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. In over 50 years of connecting riders to dirt, Fox Racing has learned that the best gear always has a discernible purpose and a strong point of view. The Ranger Defend and Recon Adventure collection takes a minimalist approach to product design, with a clear mission of providing everything you need in adventure-ready gear and absolutely nothing you don't need. Minimalist chassis, fully seam-sealed with Gore-Tex waterproofing and D30 CE level protection across the board. This gear is every bit as pure as the adventure you're chasing. Michael, we've talked about everything. We've talked about in terms of motorcycle markets, we've talked about emerging markets, which are now the markets. We've talked about the decline of US and Canada in terms of their overall significance. But one thing we've never talked about is Europe. And I tend to think, as a typical ignorant North American, I tend to think of Europe as one thing. Is that accurate?
Did you think about Europe as one thing?
Well, I tend to think of like the US as one thing, or the US and Canada as one thing, and then Europe is kind of one entity, because we tend to use that catch-all, it's either the European Union or just Europe as one sort of entity in terms of motorcycling. But you know the scene. In fact, you're in Bologna right now. We're designing a motorcycle, top secret. But tell me about what is the European motorcycle scene?
So yeah, it's good that you lead with that, because as you say, it is not a monolith. Oftentimes, as a Canadian or North American, there's this kind of, we did Europe. There's the European holiday. We went to Europe. We did 4 countries and 12 cities.
It's Tuesday. We must be in Hungary.
Yeah, exactly. The reality is there are 27 countries in the EU, and more broadly, geographically speaking, Europe is 30 plus countries and as many languages. And in terms of the motorcycle culture, it is many motorcycle cultures, unsurprisingly. I mean, the geography of Europe, people think sometimes erroneously in the English-speaking world that it is small. Europe is not small. Some European countries.
Well, there's another fact of Europe, which is spotty internet access. It's good to know that some things haven't changed. So we're rejoining Michael, who's back from Bologna. And we've got 2 tin cans stretched across the ocean with the string between them, just like 2 7-year-olds. And Michael, you had just started to say, give us some specifics of how motorcycling is different in each country.
Right. So 25 to 30 countries, at least as many languages. And so motorcycle culture is very distinct and regional here. Not that different from, say, regional differences in continental US, but much more pronounced. So like the North American market, let me rephrase that, the US market is, 500,000 vehicles. Europe is over 1 million.
Is that sold per year? Is that what you're saying?
Sold per year.
Okay.
It's more like 1.5 million if you include the low speed vehicles that are like less than 2 kilowatts, which is like 3.5 horsepower. So you have, 3 times the volume. Plus you have, this is the home of the motorcycle. And this can't be stressed enough. The motorcycle was invented in Europe depending on who you ask, either in France or in Germany. The modern 20th century motorcycle was really developed in the UK with significant input from Italy and Spain and Germany, and also France. These brands that we take for granted that have been around for 60, 80 years, come from this continent. As such, and then you have the World War I, World War II situation, which causes massive economic decline in the aftermath, where the motorcycle conveniently steps in as affordable transportation. So there are all these factors that combine to make Europe the essential motorcycle market. In terms of the amount of competition, you got vehicles here from pretty much everywhere: India, China, stuff that we don't see on the North American continent, in the US and Canada. And then, we have this culture where the motorcycle is just socialized differently. So obviously for most Europeans living south of the Alps, the motorcycle writ large is just a fact of life as daily transportation. Ordinary people, ordinary as in non-motorcyclists, are the vast majority of motorcyclists. People are buying mopeds and small motorcycles since time immemorial, and this is still the case, to go places, to get from A to B. You have, of course, enthusiasts. I'm here in Italy, huge enthusiast market for all things: long distance touring, super bikes, track bikes, dirt bikes, motocross. It's all here. Harley fans. But the reality is that, the vast bulk of the people you see on two wheels are just going around their business. In Northern European climates, Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, Germany, Netherlands, France, mostly, like the bulk of France geographically, it starts to become more of a hobby. It starts to be, there are people who ride frequently, very frequently by US standards, like, 6-8 months a year, commute heavily, but they're recognized in their communities as, oh, that's a motorcyclist, a motorcycle enthusiast. And then you have, of course, the specialty hobbyists. And then when you get really far north, like Scandinavia, and, into that I would include the British Isles, it's really just hobbyists, overwhelmingly, people who would pattern more like what we're used to in the US and Canada, where it's like, oh, I identify as a motorcycle enthusiast, so I have a bike and I use it on really nice weather days, and I organize trips, weeks or months in advance to do the thing I love doing. So we have a much broader variety of motorcycle users, but the main difference is that of that 1 million to 1.5 million new motorcycle vehicles purchased per year, the overwhelming majority are just regular everyday people buying everyday regular modes of transport that have something about them that they find appealing.
The Lowdown Show is presented by adbrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. One of my favorite stories about having ridden in Europe, and of course in my magazine days, I did that quite a bit. I was in southern Spain, and I think it was a Ducati launch, and we were riding out of a Spanish city, and of course we all have all the gear, and we're professional motorcycle journalists, and we're going through these twisty bits in the edge of town. And we were going not slowly. We weren't at Mach 1, but we were moving along. And then a woman on a scooter with extremely attractive legs, I remember that part, in heels, blew past us, in between us, and kind of did get the fuck off the road. Like, what's wrong with you people? You're on two wheels and you're clogging the road. And so even, we tend to dismiss these, and you use the term sort of non-motorcycle motorcyclists. That doesn't mean they're shitty riders, does it? I mean, these people can get down.
And the reason I say non-motorcyclists, because as those people listening or watching who have heard me talk about this subject before or read my periodical writing about this subject, this is the pillar on which the hill on which I'm going to die. Motorcycling is only good. The industry is only healthy when we sell motorcycles to people and not to motorcyclists. And in the US and Canada, we have abjectly failed to do this. And what the European markets still do very well, and they do very, very well in Asia, is understand that people of all kinds might actually enjoy riding a two-wheeler, not just because it's cheap and they need to go from A to B, because that's the dismissive, and there's a subtext of racism and exclusivity that is thrown in that terminology when people say, well, commuter, like, oh, it's just one of them. Well, excuse me, just one of them? How many people who buy a Porsche are actually good at driving a car fast? I'd say mostly none of them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
People buy performance cars who don't drive fast, don't know how to drive fast, don't want to drive fast. People buy giant SUVs and pickup trucks with no intention of ever picking up a load of gravel, but we don't say, well, we're not going to market F-150s to them, so we have to change the mentality to a more European approach, which is to say, hey, you might enjoy riding this small bike or big bike even as a commuter option rather than sitting in traffic for 3 hours a day. And maybe even if you are stuck in traffic on your nice big motorcycle, maybe once in a while you're actually going to enjoy your commute. You're going to smile. And to your point, you're damn right. There are, quote unquote, regular people. The cliche here in this part of Italy is you see a maxi scooter, so a large capacity scooter, something which is 300 cc or more, like a Yamaha X Max, a Yamaha T Max, the big Honda, and it's a guy. Sadly, I was going to say older guy, so what I really mean is someone our age.
Yeah, an older guy.
An older guy. Because in my head, older guy it's me in my head. I'm 30 and I'm thinking some old guy. He's like 45. So no, it's someone our age, pot-bellied with like a faded polo shirt and Birkenstocks, and they're on a large step-through maxi scooter with a cigarette in an open-face helmet, and the guy is hauling. He's on a national highway, one of the 2-lane roads, not the big divided highway, and he's carving through traffic and passing buses, and they have that body language that we all as bikers we recognize, expertise.
Yeah.
The soft shoulders, there's no tension in the arms. They're managing that bike. It's an extension of their body. And they're used to, because of the nature of the geography or topography, they're used to lean angle, like the woman on the scooter. I mean, she was over at an astonishing degree of lean. Yeah. And you could just tell that this was like she was just going to work. Yeah. She was going to get milk or going to work or, going to meet her friend. And this guy that I'm describing is probably retired, or it's after work and he's trying to get home to watch the soccer game, or, these are, what I'm trying to say is these are fragments of daily life. Yes. And the motorcycle is knit into that daily life. Now, some, again,
I'm going to jump in here, because I think one of the assumptions that I've always made is there's that line in Europe below, and then below that line, people use vehicles as everyday transport, and above the line, it starts to become more of as what we would recognize in North America.
Yeah,
in terms of specialist enthusiasts like I would be. Now, but is it? And here's the question I've always wanted to know: is it based solely on climate, or is there a cultural difference there? So you think of Southern California or Arizona, you could do the same thing there, or Louisiana. So is it different culturally, or is there something else at play here?
It's cultural, because if it were weather, then as you say, we should have this kind of vibrant, thriving, motorcycle usage across broad swaths of the public in warmer climates, and we don't. yeah, Texas, Florida, California represent the lion's share of U.S. motorcycle sales. It's correlated with weather. That's not the causation. The European, going back to Europe, it's cultural. Northern Europe, Southern Europe, and there are Europeans here, and like my parents are European, don't get offended when I say this, but there is an economic line there too. Northern Europe is generally wealthier than Southern Europe. Now, I'm in Italy, and let me dispel some myths. Italy and Spain are very sophisticated modern economies. Italy is a G7 country, as in one of the 7 top economies in the world. This is a high-tech society. This is a wealthy society by any measure. That said, it's not Germany, which is number 3.
Right.
It's not the Netherlands, which doesn't rank as highly simply because they're small and there's not enough of them. If there were as many Dutch people as there are Germans, it would be number 2 or 3 or 4 in the world in the economy. These are highly productive economies, and where people are wealthy and correlated, weather is worse. And I'm sorry to my Dutch friends, the weather is worse in the Netherlands. You're going to lean towards getting a nice car. The other thing Northern Europeans do very well is public transit. So, and there isn't the stigma with public transit that there is in the US and Canada. Oh, you're poor, you're on a bus. Well, yeah, because buses in Canada and the US suck. Our subways suck, our train system sucks. It's expensive, it's slow. You go to the Dutch public transit system, Denmark, Germany, amazing. Reasonably priced, clean, good Wi-Fi, So why do I bring that into it? Because what I'm trying to say is motorcycle culture is the result of many things. If I have German road network and German driver discipline, and I have a German salary, I'm going to buy a German car. And when it's not convenient to drive, I'll use the very efficient, affordable, and nice public transit. There's no stigma attached to it, like, businessman or professional, why is he taking the S-Bahn? It's like, yeah, like normal people do. It's not associated with some kind of like social thing.
What's the old quip that I can't remember what the origin of this, but the quip was that this person's definition of failure is anyone over 30 taking public transit.
Yeah, it's terrible. I hate that.
Yeah.
I wish we would figure that out on this side of the Atlantic. So there's that aspect to it, and that inevitably drives Northern Europeans to aspire to car ownership. And all Europeans have cars. It's the poorest country in Europe, people buy cars. It's just that in Northern Europe, they tend to, generally speaking, buy nicer cars. They have more purchasing power. They have better roads. People, it's cultural. Motorcycles there are really seen as, oh, you like that? That's cool. But, you get into France, and France is the in-between. Parts of France are like Northern Europe, culturally speaking, and the bulk of France is more like Mediterranean Europe, culturally speaking. Paris is a great litmus. When I was working at Yamaha years ago, we were based in Amsterdam, and so we would go to Paris frequently for focus groups, customer interviews, that sort of thing. This is the late 90s, early 2000s, the height of the sport bike boom. Paris is where, and this is pertinent to Adventure Rider, channel followers.
Michael, I'm gonna stop you there. I have to euthanize the cat. Let's take a moment to honor Lowell, our former cat, who I just had to put down. But he was good, but everybody has their time. Michael, let's, with that natural segue, let's go back into focus groups in Paris when you were working at GK Design, Yamaha's design house in Amsterdam. So you're in Paris.
Right. So I was saying Paris was a great litmus sort of test of taking the temperature of where potential new kinds of motorcycle culture were emerging. Paris, big city, 6-7 million people, very cosmopolitan, as we know, but also has suburbs, sprawling suburbs, because it's in a part of France that's very flat. And so you end up with this like commuter culture that doesn't often exist in a lot of European capitals or secondary cities. The French famously do things their own way. And what's interesting, I think, for the adventure rider, ADV rider community is the modern adventure bike is born in France. The products aren't, but the concept is, because dual sport bikes existed forever. The Yamaha, XT500 being probably the progenitor of that archetype. Where were they really popular? Was it in the countryside? Yeah, in the California Central Valley, sure. But in Europe, these bikes were popular in cities. They figured out the SUV of motorcycles thing 30 years before everyone else did, which is that wide handlebar, soft, long travel suspension. This is perfect. And you got to remember, traffic in Europe today is very modern. People stop at red lights and they follow signals and drive like civilized people. 25, 30 years ago, Europe, Southern Europe, France, Italy, Spain, it was a free-for-all. And I could say that as a foreigner, having lived in those countries at those times, people were unpredictable. So having a motorcycle that could, with a lot of leverage, where you could see over the hoods of cars, where you could dodge and weave, hit a curb maybe, and shrug it off. Dual sports became a thing in Paris before they became a thing anywhere else. And then people started putting street tires and 17-inch road wheels on XTs. The supermoto is born in Paris as a commuter weapon, as an urban assault vehicle. Mm. People don't realize that the maxi scooter was born in Paris and in Rome, because Honda saw people basically using mopeds and overloading them with what we would call a milk crate, but basically baskets. And they created the first really big maxi scooter with an integrated trunk. Wasn't super successful, but Piaggio created a clone called the Hexagon, which was in production for like 15 years, set off the whole maxi scooter thing. If you've ever seen a Suzuki Bergman, you can thank the Hexagon. So these products were born of, of a culture willing to experiment. And sometimes it was Paris, often. Sometimes it was Milan. The BMW GS that we all fawn over now, apparently, started really to succeed in Milan. It had been for sale for 10 years as an also ran. It was a sideshow to the BMW, catalog for a decade. They were makers of touring motorcycles. Remember, big stand-up, lots of plastic. Old men and police officers in Europe drove BMWs. And suddenly Milanese businessmen who were making 150,000 euros a year, working at the stock exchange, banks, finance. They didn't want to commute on a little scooter, and they didn't want to commute in their nice BMW car because they'd be stuck in traffic for too long and the car would get dinged up. BMW motorcycle has prestige, and they make a dual sport, what they thought of as dual sport, talking second, third generation GS. This thing was a tank. If it fell over because when you park the bikes tightly as they do in Europe and one falls, they knock over like dominoes, you didn't care so much. It was all metal, It had a sort of tough lux to it, the way a Range Rover does. That starts in Milan. Guys wearing 5,000 euro Zegna suits and bespoke leather shoes are driving these GS vehicles, not Klim-clad, Starbucks cruiser.
Klim-clad, I like that. It's like trem-clad, but different.
Yeah. So this is the exciting thing about the motorcycle scene in Europe, is it's much more experimental. I mean, this is and I'd love to use this moment to segue into the fact that I cannot stress enough how much most every significant archetype of motorcycle was born here in the past, but also in the recent present, basically forever. We don't get Vespa in America. We don't get Vespa being created in Japan. Vespa is created in Italy, in Europe, to solve a real problem. And, it invents a whole new kind of motorcycle. And as I said, this can be applied to almost every single archetype other than the motocross bike, which is a uniquely American invention. And by invention, I don't mean, the modern motocross motorcycle was invented in Japan, but the category and its needs and its specification and the way it's laid out was born in the California Central Valley, where guys were seeing how far they could jump a motorcycle.
Right.
So it's this experimentation that allows, and the fact that the culture allows for it. People here are willing to give a new thing a try, much more so, I think, than on our side of the Atlantic.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. It's all thanks to their new secure purchase. Ever try to buy a car and end up in a parking lot with a stranger and some blind trust? Or spend half the day at the dealership talking to pushy salespeople and signing paperwork? Or maybe, worst of all, waiting for hours at the DMV just to transfer the title? Well, that era is over. For years, eBay has been the go-to for gearheads, collectors, and do-it-yourselfers. Because whatever you're into, from classics to SUVs to trucks to imports, eBay's got it. And now with secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your next ride, it's where you can buy it, start to finish. Sellers and titles are verified, paperwork is handled by experts, and payments are traceable and digital. So you know exactly who you're dealing with and exactly what you're getting. Plus, you can finance, insure, and register your vehicle all in one place. No more hours at the dealership, no more trips to the DMV. Get your vehicle plates and paperwork shipped to your door, ready to drive. And it's all part of one seamless process designed to feel as easy as buying anything else online. And eligible vehicles purchased on eBay are backed by up to $100,000 in purchase protection. Thinking about selling your ride? Secure purchase makes that simple too, because you know your buyer and their funds are verified. If you still owe in your car, the financing payoff is fully integrated, so you're not chasing paperwork or waiting on checks to clear. And with secure purchase, you get paid fast. And you're not going to be stuck chasing no-shows or answering the fifth, "Is it still available?" message. This is what modern car buying looks like. Skip the DMV, skip the sketchy meetups. Buy it on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. In over 50 years of connecting riders to dirt, Fox Racing has learned that the best gear always has a discernible purpose and a strong point of view. The Ranger Defend and Recon Adventure collection takes a minimalist approach to product design, with a clear mission of providing everything you need in adventure-ready gear and absolutely nothing you don't need. Minimalist chassis, fully seam-sealed with Gore-Tex waterproofing and D30 CE level protection across the board. This gear is every bit as pure as the adventure you're chasing. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. And of course, no conversation of a comparison, although not that this is necessarily a comparison, but you know, the dominant motorcycle in North America for years was the Cruiser. What is the status of the Cruiser in Europe? Is it a curio or is it something else?
In Latin Europe, it's got the same level of status as a Ducati or MV Agusta does in the US. Oh, you're one of those. It's super rare. I got a ride home in a taxi the other day, and the cab driver was, this kind of like a Lux cab. So it was like a black Mercedes, and the guy had a white shirt and a tie. And I only mention that because the car he was driving, the clothes he was wearing, upscale man. But when we got to chatting, he told me, I have a motorcycle, and I'm expecting him to say, the usual things. And he goes, yeah, no, I have a Road King. Wow. And he's like, I love that sound, and this big classic American motorcycle. I love it. It's my favorite thing to do. That's a curio. That is a very rare product here. You go to Northern Europe, you go to Sweden and Germany, Harleys are everywhere. Cruisers are everywhere. I don't know the stats like off the top of my head, but they are a significant part of the motorcycle market in specifically Scandinavia and Germany, because there is this, especially Germany, this post-war, there's a certain kind of German who has a profound love affair and affection for Americana, but that's sort of like Disneyfied Americana, right? Like they're gonna, if they smoke, they're gonna smoke Marlboro Reds. They're gonna drive a Harley. They're gonna wear, not Levi's. They're gonna get like Lee or Wranglers, like,
or those selvage jeans that you're never supposed to watch that cost €580.
Yeah, and they love this idea and in Germany is the only and Scandinavia are the only markets in Europe where American automobiles sell in any kind of volume, and they're still small, but you'll see a Chrysler, you'll see a Dodge minivan, you'll see a whatever US made car, an F-150 or something in Sweden. You won't see it anywhere down here. Like, forget it. And so cruisers appeal to this kind of bad boy Viking type, same kind of guy, heavy, big, beardy, drink a lot of beer, love the slightly bad boy image. If you go to a German village pub on a Sunday, you're going to see cruisers parked out front. France, you'll see the Sportster more, but they see the Sportster differently than we do. They see the Sportster not as it's a lady's bike. They see that as the cool Harley. And to any Harley fans out there, I count myself among them. I don't know what the hate is. Sportster's the only Harley Davidson that ever appealed to me. It's like, in parentheses, light. It's narrow. It looks good. And the French will trick it out into a cafe racer, or just an XR kind of looking thing. And it's a cool looking roadster. And so you'll see more of those. Victory and the Japanese roadster cruisers, almost none. It's seen here. Those products are seen as exactly what the pejorative that we level here is like. It's a ripoff. It's a clone.
Yeah.
Why would I get a Virago or a Vulcan? Like, yeah, it's a great motorcycle, but if you're going to do that, get a Harley.
And of course, one of the hardest things I think for me to understand before I started going to Europe, and of course I don't know it nearly as well as you do, but just the culture that you would see around races. And of course, if you watch MotoGP, as many of us do, you'll see Valencia, and you'll see the helicopter will be following the track, but you'll see in the corner the parking lot, and it's just acre upon acre of rows of motorcycles. In fact, probably more motorcycles than I've ever seen in my life here on the road in North America are in the parking lot. And how does that influence that love of competition? How does that influence the motorcycles that you see?
It can't be overstated. Motorsport, and this is an opinion, but I think motorsport in general is a European thing. I had the great fortune to go to Le Mans this year, the 24-hour car race, where overwhelmingly European brands dominate not only the racing, but the archetype itself. And, Japanese and American teams were there, but let's be honest, they're participating in a European sport. Formula One, Grand Prix, MotoGP, World Superbike, these are European inventions. And yes, the races are all over the place, but you're not going to see the fans in Doha or California or Texas or whatever. Japan is maybe an outlier that you do see in a European race. You go to the Dutch TT for Superbike, the World Superbike weekend in Assen.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some of the best memories I have of the Netherlands. And for those who've been there, to the Netherlands, but also to the Dutch TT, know what I mean. It is a crazy weekend of partying, camping, motorcycling. It is this word is overused. I don't use it almost ever, so I'm taking it out and using it in this instance. It is awesome. It inspires awe because you get 60,000 people descending on this farm field. The weather's terrible. The food is awful. The beer is garbage and expensive. And you just don't care because everybody's happy to be there. And you wake up at 5 a.m, 6 a.m, listening to, back in my day, Two Strokes when it was Grand Prix weekend, warming up for 125 race on Sunday morning or practice. If it was the TT Superbike event, you've got 2 races, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. Sorry, that's wrong. And the Dutch race is Friday and Saturday. And you've been up till 4 a.m. with people who are now your best friend, who you met the night before because you're camping next to them. And they come from all over Europe, and you'd get like a GSXR with 6 packs of beer duct taped to the passenger seat, and crudely made campgrounds. I mean, to suffer through it's like Glastonbury,
Yeah.
music festival in the mud, music, alcohol, bonfires, creative destruction, and then world-class motorcycle racing. And then the real race, the real Dutch Grand Prix, is getting on the highway and going back to Amsterdam on Sunday afternoon. And it's phenomenal. And if I could speak like this about Jerez in the south of Spain, which is what you're describing, when I lived in Spain, those 5 years, I went to 3 MotoGP events every year because Spain cheats and has 3 MotoGP events. And it was glorious. The whole weekend is amazing. And again, why is this so Eurocentric? Not, why are there so many races in Spain? Why does Italy get 2 races or 3 races, depending on how you look at it? Because the fans can support it. Why does New York get 2 hockey teams? Because the fans support it. 3, actually, if you think about New Jersey.
We don't recognize New Jersey.
Right. So, this is the point. If there was a culture here, and it's a dragon chasing its tail sort of thing, chicken and egg, pick your metaphor. Our industry, motorcycle industry in North America, sorry, I keep having to correct myself. Mexico's doing great. In Canada and the US is completely failing because from the OEMs that operate in our shores, to the dealers, to the magazines, to the people, the participants, including ourselves, we are self-editing. We are exclusive. We don't like that person because that person is on the wrong kind of motorcycle. Oh, you're on an 883 Sportster. Oh, you're on a sport bike. I'm not going to wave at you. Oh, you're riding that brand, blah, blah, blah.
And does that dismissiveness not exist in Europe?
It does, but it's really casual and it's a joke.
Right.
It's literally a joke. It doesn't have the weight that it does. And I can say that. Look, I speak Spanish fluently, French, and Italian. It's not a flex. I'm saying I'm a good spy. I can listen in and feel what people are saying. They tease each other. I'm picking up a rental motorcycle tomorrow in Florence, and I'm driving it back to Bologna. And it's this famous motorcycle road. It'll be a Saturday. There's like a little bar at the top of the pass where there's like hundreds and hundreds of motorcycles. I'll snap a photo and I'll send it to you. It's everything under the sun. It's big touring rigs. It's sport bikes. It's naked bikes. It's dual sports. It's everything. And people just are bikers. They're like, hey, cool. Like you described, you go to the parking lot outside of a superbike or MotoGP event. Is it all sport bike guys? No. People show up on a Liberty 125 moped, and they're not looked down upon. They're fans, and they've come for the sport. They've come for the racing. And I mean, there are assholes everywhere in the world. I just think that when it comes to motorcycling, Europe gets it right. They're like, okay, I have my opinion, the bike I prefer, the way I prefer to dress and ride, but I'm not going to like openly mock you or tell you. And I think the worst form of this, sadly, exists in the ADV rider community a lot, which is the snobby side. Your particular brand or vehicle or the way you use it is beneath me.
I think that's the KLR with the milk crate is I think one of those subsets, isn't it?
I think it exists on all of the subsets. I think there's almost this romanticization of the milk crate KLR. Like, I'm the real guy. I'm out there in bad weather with my rubber boots from Canadian Tire. I'm the real adventure rider. And then there's the KTM guy with all the accessories who's like looking down their nose at an Africa Twin, merely a Honda. What do they know? Right. Enough. Stop complaining about how the suspension of the CRF 300L is not adequate. Adequate for whom? Just ride your fucking motorcycle and let me ride mine. And then when you get a flat tire or run out of gas or just stop under an overpass in the rain and I pull up next to you, we say hi. Hey, cool bike. Where are you headed today? You know, like that. This is what's killing motorcycle culture. And no, it isn't killing. It has killed motorcycle culture in Canada and the US. And what Europe gets absolutely right is just ride your bike. And if I have opinions about what you're doing, I'm going to keep them to myself unless we're friends. And even then, it's friendly, you know? So, you know, it's kind of funny because the stereotype culturally is that we North American, English speaking North Americans are so laid back and so friendly. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. And Europeans are so snobby and so arrogant. I don't know if that stereotype is really true. Certainly not in motorcycle culture.
I mean, based on what you said, and here's an example from my own life where I live in a region where there's a lot of money. Sadly, I have no part of that, the money part, but I'm close to it. They throw me scraps when they walk by. Well, you know, I've joked before that, you know, I do brake jobs in my cars in the driveway and the neighbors all sort of peer in. It's like, are you okay? Because of course they would never do that. But I have a road bike. I have an $800 road bicycle that's 20 years old, and I have a mountain bike helmet, and it's the wrong helmet, and I know I wear the wrong socks because it's just whatever socks come out of the drawer. And you know, it's interesting. You know, I'll go to the coffee shop and everybody has their carbon fiber this and their titanium that, and you really, I get the looks now. At least, now, I don't know if this is good or bad. I'm past the point at which these things concern me. And maybe wearing track pants to church is next, but you know, it just, you can certainly, it's like when objects become merely luxury items, we make such a parallel between our own identity and the product, I think, when they're merely luxury versus if there's some degree of practicality. And I think this is perhaps goes to explain what you were just talking about. It's like it's just a motorcycle and you use it and people understand that you use it. But you know, I do the same thing. I feel guilty to admit it, but you know, if I see a man of a certain age on a step through scooter on a Bergman, I think, you know, why would you do that? It's terrible. It's terrible.
I mean, look, I share your, you know, I raced bicycles, road bicycles when I was a teenager, and I still ride. I have the bike that I got made for myself in 1996, 95. It's a hand-built Italian steel road racing bicycle with Campagnolo parts. Anyone who knows anything about bicycles might sound familiar, but it's a 30-year-old antique. The trouble is, I'm a 50-year-old antique. So it's a better bicycle than I need. I adore it. It fits me as well today as it did when I got it. And I share your experience. If I stop at the popular bike shop, trendy cafe / bicycle shop on the most popular cycling route in Nova Scotia, if it's a Saturday or Sunday, especially, the townies are in from Halifax and they've got their $12,000-$15,000 carbon unobtainium and the right Rafa jersey and the socks and the blah blah blah, and I'm wearing my Telecom, you know, replica jersey from, you know, 1997, and I'm just proud that at 50 I could still fit something I bought 30 years ago. But you know, there are the sideways glances, like who let, you know, grandpa in with his, you know, antique. And, you know, my response to that is to just laugh, like, whatever, you know, I don't care. We do that in everything now. This is unfortunately seems to be the culture of hobbies. It is not mainstream consumer culture. Does anyone look at you funny when you pull up to the gas station or the grocery store in whatever car? No. If it's an older vehicle, I have vintage cars. What happens? People smile, people point, people come over and talk to you. The vast majority ignore you. They just see some old car. And if they judge quietly, silently, which is, you know, fine. Yes, I drive on a nice sunny day a 1976 Chrysler Cordoba in brown. And it's an absurd car and it makes me laugh. And I go get ice cream and it's always the same story. You get teenagers looking at it with a combination of like confusion and fear. Like, what am I seeing? What is that? And then you get inevitably someone about 10 years my senior, maybe more, come over and go, I had one of those. And it's usually a nice conversation. They come over, a lovely, one time an old timer comes over and says, oh my gosh, he was my age. Old timer, what am I saying? He's like my age, our age. And he said, my dad had one. And he said, would it be too much to ask, could I sit in the back seat? I knew exactly, you're laughing, but I knew exactly what he meant. He wanted to time travel, and I let him.
And the awkward thing about that story is he's still in the back seat.
Yes, that's
and
correct.
that was last year.
That was last year.
That was last year.
We should be allowed to enjoy whatever motorcycle we, people ask me sometimes because I work in this business, what's the best motorcycle? And I go, the best motorcycle is the one you want. The one that you ride and that you want to ride again. And stop judging yourself. Doesn't fit a mold, who cares? And maybe that's just good life advice. But I think the thrust of this episode was about the European motorcycle scene. Europeans are better, generally speaking, at just being themselves. Look, these are thousands of year-old societies. I'm 4 kilometers away from a Roman road, a 2,000-year-old piece of infrastructure. It's straight as an arrow, and it still goes to Rimini from Bologna like it did when they built it. So this is a society that has thought about mobility for 20 centuries. The width of a lane of traffic anywhere in the Western world owes its dimension to the Roman chariot. That's a fact. The Roman road defines the width of all roads.
Wow.
It's stuff like this. Why do we drive automobiles with our body on the left-hand side in most of the world and the transmission, if you still use one, on the right-hand side? Because it was Europeans, Germans in this case, who decided to go against tradition, which was thousands of years, horses, horsemen, carts, chariots, passed on the left, the way the British do, the Australians do today. The Germans who invented the car said, well, cars are complicated and have all these levers and dials and retarding and advancing ignition, and most people, logically, are right-handed. And they need that extra coordination in the right hand. So since this equipment is in the middle of the car, we're going to put the person on the left. Ergo, we're passing on the right. And that's how we end up with these traditions. So the modern mobility is European. The bicycle was invented in Europe. The pneumatic tire was invented in Europe. Brakes were invented in Europe.
Not that they use them.
Which is why they win races, because they don't use brakes. But yeah, so, and fast forward to today, I am here, full circle. Why am I in this building developing a product in Italy for a non-Italian company, non-European company, like so many? Why do Chinese, Japanese, Indian, American brands develop motorcycles in Europe? Because this is where the expertise is. And why is the expertise here? Probably because there's a lot of passion, yes, but because there's a culture. There are universities here in Spain and in Italy that teach motorcycle engineering, not car, not general automotive mechanical engineering, that too, but that do racing engineering, that do motorcycle design, that do motorcycle dynamics. It's not a coincidence. These are the people that sign up for these courses as 18-year-old high schoolers. They've already been riding for 5 years. They got their motorino, their little 50cc Piaggio Ciao out of a barn that their old uncle left behind, or they, this happens less now, but this was the case in our generation, Gen X, as recently as 25 years ago. All of my compatriots here, they all started riding when they were 14. And then they got their 125 license, and then they got their, intermediate license, and they got their open license. By the time they're 25, they have more skill in motorcycling under their belts as regular people than what we would consider a hardcore iron butt challenge enduro motorcyclist does at 40.
Right.
And they learn those skills on underpowered vehicles, in extreme traffic congestion, on Roman cobbles, on wet streetcar tracks. You catch my drift here. It's place incubates riders, and it incubates skill. And even if these people at 16, 18, because of their circumstances, leave mopeds behind and get a car on public transit and never ride again, as many Europeans do, their driving behavior is, I'm aware that there are motorcyclists, and I'm aware of motorcycle behavior because they once upon a time were a motorcyclist. So that's, I guess, that ties this all together. What is the European motorcycle scene? There are many, but I would say the one thing that I think defines it is just socialized into the fabric of society here. It is as common as a bicycle, and normal, and not seen as rebellious or outre or weird or dangerous. I mean, it has dangers, but it is just seen as part of the fabric of everyday life. And that's probably the reason why motorcycles, both design, engineering, production, and sales, are so strong here.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. Ever try to buy a car in line and end up in a parking lot with a stranger and some blind trust? Well, that era is over. Now with secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery. It's all built in. This is the modern way to buy your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary.